And today I'm going to give you an overview of the difference between our new product called SARS Anywhere and the existing product called SARS Grid. Okay. To begin with, you'll notice that the SARS Anywhere is completely web-enabled. What does this mean? Well, first off, it supports all the modern browsers from Internet Explorer to Chrome to Firefox to Safari. So it runs on PCs, it runs on Macs, and by the time you probably get the system, it'll be running on iPads and possibly on smartphones. So it's a really exciting transition for SARS Grid to get to this level. I know usually when there's a new product comes out, there's a lot of concern about learning the new product. I think I'm going to show you today that the learning curve is going to be very, very small when it comes to SARS Anywhere, because we've tried with all the capability we had to make it as much like SARS Grid as possible so that you don't have to go through a long learning curve to use the new software. So let me begin. One of the big differences, obviously, it's web-enabled, which means that more than likely you'll have a link somewhere to get to it, as opposed to the the infamous old SARS menu color icon here. I have an icon I set just for this for my demo because I don't have a portal and you go through to set this stuff up. So let me set up the database and give you a little tour of what's in here and how it works. Again, just like in your current version, there'll be a username and password. It'll be the same username and password you have now. Okay. And when it first starts up, it starts up based upon your access rights. In this case here, I have myself identified as an advisor. So it comes up under my grid. Now you notice there's no more floating toolbar. Okay, so let me do this. Let me walk around the screen and give you a little tour of what's here. Okay, it's really driven now by, instead of choices from the floating toolbar, it's driven by the tabs at the top of the screen. You'll see the basic three tabs that are embedded here are the grid, my grid, and drop-in. Okay, now I'll show you in a later session, part 2 of this, how to add tabs, to rearrange tabs, and things like that. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, if you go across the top of the screen, the first thing you see is what's called the flyout menu. Okay, and what can it do for you? Well, in this case here, it gives you a choice to change locations if you have access to multiple locations. You can change the date that you're basically looking at. You can see on mine it says, Monday the 16th of March. If you wanted to go to the 18th of March, you can just click on the 18th, and lo and behold, that's where it is. If you want to go back to today, you just click on today, or you choose the date it is, and you go back there. Okay. Other things on the flyout menu in this mode here are basically just that. It's got the location, the date, and today. That's all there is to it. Okay. Moving around the screen. Okay. There's a button here called Quick Links. Okay. Basically, it's very, very similar to the command menu. If I hit the down arrow here, you'll see here's a list of all the functionality that's available from this, from this mode, if you will. And you'll recognize a lot of the features there are exactly the same ones that you saw in the command menu. Additional information, alerts, contacts, advising, master schedules, all those things that you could do before are still here for you just with a click of the button. Okay? Next to that, you'll see is a refresh. If you want to refresh the screen, you can just click on that, and it will refresh the screen for you. Okay? There's a print button next door. Now, again, the print button works with whatever print reports are available in the current environment. Now, again, for my grid, when I click on print, what do I get? The daily report and the snapshot report, just like in the current version. Nothing's changed here. Okay? Next to that is chat. Okay, the old lightning bolt. Now you see one of the new things here in chat, which is an add-on, you can mark your current status. By default, it's available. If for some reason you don't want to receive chats, you can change it to, oops, sorry about that. Let me go back there for a second. You can change that to busy or do not disturb based upon the current situation. To see who's on the chat list, all you have to do is click on the lightning bolt, and up comes a list of everybody that's available on this list. You can see the current status. Right now everybody's offline, but they could be working and be available to chat with or to broadcast to. Again, very similar in the way it worked in the old version. However, there's some really neat new features in here I will talk about in a later presentation. Okay. Next to that is the configuration button, the little gear, if you will, right there. Okay. And the configuration button allows you to make changes to your system. And I'm going to talk about these in more detail a few minutes ago. You can add different columns on the screen. You can add different tabs on the screen. You can configure how your chat works and some other things that we'll go into more detail in just a few minutes. But this is kind of the major configuration button, if you will, on the screen. Okay. Next to that is our infamous help. If I click on this, if I have it configured on my screen, and it looks like I don't, but it'll bring up the help menu, which allows you to try to figure, welcome to the meeting. Now you can see, just like in our old version, it's context, index, search, glossary, just as we had with the previous version, to allow you to find information about some question or issue you have with the system. And going across the screen right now, the last thing over on the end here is the user account information. And what this is for basically is to change some information about who you are, to change your password, or just to log out. Okay? So again, I'm going to go through some of these things in a little more detail later in the session today, or in the session part 2, which will be coming up very shortly. So let's go back to the flyout menu. And again, I talked about that pretty much on this screen here. I think I'm going to go over to My Grid because there's more information available. Now you see when I change from My Grid to The Grid, it's equivalent to what was in SARS Grid, which is multi-dates. It comes up from my schedule, Mr. Adams, for all these dates going into the future. How do I see everybody for one day? Well, you go to the flyout menu, click on that, and you notice there's more information here. As you saw before, I have the location, I have the dates, I have today, but now I have short name. It shows Mr. Adams here, which is me. If I click on all and move off the flyout menu, now you can see everybody scheduled for today. Okay? So you can see it works exactly the same way again. If I click on the flyout menu, I can change the date, I can change the short name. I could come in here and I could change the specialty. If you remember from your current system, SARS Grid, if you've stepped the specialties up, I could go in here and say, I want to see who does the veterans. And what I get when I move off the flyout, I will get just those people, one or more, who have the, work with the veterans, if you will. So it helps the scheduler, it helps the student from eSARS to find the right person. So let's go back to all and all. Okay, so we talked about location. Now again, with this new version of SARS Anywhere, the concept of future, history, and current have pretty much gone away. And to some extent, been that way for a long time. If you think about it, it's just a continuous stream of dates. If I go up and check on the flyout menu, you can see it shows you all the dates here. And today is what? Is the 15th, which is actually Sunday. I'm doing this presentation on a Sunday. So let me bring it up to Monday where you can see the stuff here. That's what it looks like. One of the things that we lost in going from SARS Grid to SARS Anywhere are the function keys. Web pages don't support the function keys. Okay, so one of my favorite function keys was F2 and F3 for one day forward, one day back. So how did we do to replace those things? Well, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's a next button that goes to the next day, or a previous button, which goes back a day. Okay, so those take the place of the F2 and F3. Okay. Moving right ahead, the tabs at the top of the screen, you can see we've got the grid you've seen, my grid you've seen, the drop-in screen you've seen. Now again, which of these are available is based upon your access rights. If you're a front room scheduler for the for the system, you would probably have access to the grid and drop-in, but not my grid. If you were a counselor advisor, you may have access to all three of these. It just depends upon the access rights you've been given. Now, one of the things you can do is add additional tabs. So let's just say if we were to go back and go to my grid, and I'm playing the role of Mr. Adams, the advisor, and I may want to have some of the things at my fingertips. So what I can do is I have a choice. I can go to Quick Links and do all these things, or let's go over to the gear. That's the thing we configure from. And one of the options is setting up some tabs. So here's the three you start with. Okay. Now here's all the rest of the tabs that I have access to based upon my access rights. Okay. So I want the notepad. I use the notepad a lot. Okay. And I probably want to have student history handy if I want to check and see information about a student. Maybe I want to have quick date change because I can do those kind of things handy available. I can change the order. I can't change the order of the first three, but after the first three, I can rearrange these any way I want. Okay. Maybe I want to have additional information handy. Put that in the system there. So when I click on OK, watch what happens. See, now I have, instead of just these first three, I've added 1, 2, 3, 4 more tabs to the system. And so what I can do is if I'm on Mr. Smith's record here, and I click on the notepad, up comes the notepad with the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it is, messages from Mr. Smith. And you can see I can click on them just like before. They view a little better than they used to. And there's one other thing here. If I'm want to look at a bunch of these at one time, say I want to look at, let's just say I want to look at this one and this one. Now I can see these all at the same time while having to go one to the next to basically view what's going on there. And we'll spend some more time on the notepad in a future webinar for these kind of things. But to say this, basically you can move back and forth easily between these different tabs based on what you're looking for. If I'm allowed to change my schedule, I can go to Quick Date Change, click on Quick Date Change, brings up my schedule with all the available schedule codes here, and maybe I'm going to be doing some extra drop-in later in the afternoon. I can basically fill those things in, save it, go back to my grid, and those changes are there. I think you're seeing it as you look at this. If you look at the screen right now, it looks just like my grid in the old version. The only difference is a web page versus a client server. So it's become almost transparent to you. And those people who, want to work from home, if you will, or from some other location, as long as you're allowed to work from there and have, web access, you can run the system. You don't have to be tied into the server anymore like you were in the previous version. Let's talk about quick links for just a minute. Again, I mentioned it in the passing, but you can see that each of the things we talked about is available here also if you don't have the tab handy. So if I wanted to go to Quick Date Change, I click here, pretty much the same thing. Okay, so it really gives you a couple different ways to work with these things. If you've got all the tabs you want, but you need that for some reason, you can always bring it up from the quick links, or you can bring it up from here. Okay. It's, quick links is the command menu. It's just got a new name, if you will. And what you notice, as I mentioned earlier, we've subdivided into 2 categories. All the stuff on the top, above the little bar here, are the things you typically get used from quick links. And these are the other things here that are available but not commonly used. And you'll notice down here, like unlock column is grayed out. Why is that? Because it's not locked. If it was already locked, it would show up here, and there would be a at the top of the screen a little padlock showing that this column is locked. Okay. So if we go back to the grid for just a minute here. Excuse me. And most of the stuff I've already talked about a little bit, but let's just go back and review it again real quick. You can see when I first come up here, it comes up in my mode, multiple dates. I can see my schedule for multiple dates. And based upon the number of days that are set up for, I can jump forward that number of days at a time looking at future dates. Got a vacation coming up. That's exciting for that person. Anyway, if I want to go back to today, all I got to do is go up here to, the flyout menu and click on today, And it brings me back to, basically, the 16th, which is Monday. Be there, I have no schedule on Sunday. Okay? So navigating around, I can do it either with going to the flyout menu and choose a date, or choose a short name, or choose a specialty, or choose a location if I access the multiple locations. I can move forward, a group of days at a time if I'm in, multiple day mode, or if I am in individual, everybody for one day. Okay. And what next gets me now will be one day at a time. So for everybody here, I go from the 15th to the 16th, 17th back to the 16th. Okay, so you can see how this works here. Okay. And as I mentioned before, there is no F2 or F3, but next and previous take the place of that. And one of the nice things here, when I click on a cell, you can see which cell it's much easier to see than just a little black box around it. You can see it changes it to a color. And even though you have to use the same set of colors that everybody else uses, if I go back over to my little gear here for a second, the configuration, one of the things that's available here is there's a number of themes. And you can choose a different theme with a different color palette for all the stuff around the cells to change the way it looks. Like if I go to Sunny, for example, and bring it up, you'll notice that when it refreshes here, all this stuff around the screen is changed to a different color palette. So it gives you the ability to make changes based upon, how you prefer to work. And one of the interesting things about the web applications is that as before, if you were working on a PC and you got all configured the way you like it, and you went to a different PC, you had to reconfigure that PC to be just the way you like it also. It stayed at the PC level. Now it's tied to your login. So if you in your desktop, in your office, make all these changes, add these tabs, change the column order, do all this stuff, and you go home and you log on to it from home, it'll look exactly the same. That configuration follows you around like a little dog. It's basically, when you log on, whatever your log on is, it knows your configuration. Okay, we've talked about the stuff here. Now, one thing I haven't talked about yet is the drop-in screen. What does it look like? Now you'll notice one thing is different here. There's a drop-in tab, and look over here. It tells me there are 4 students waiting. So I can see right from the screen. I can be on my grid or the grid and see there's people on the drop-in screen. I go over here. Looks pretty much like the old drop-in screen did. Again, you can see the buttons have moved a little bit. You can see there's an add button down here. If I click on add, a very familiar screen comes up. Put somebody's ID in here. Pops the information. You can choose whatever the reason for coming in. You can also choose a comment. Reason for BISIT, and click on commit, and it adds them to the list. Okay. If you're an advisor and you're looking off the list, you want to take somebody off the list, you just double click on it just like before. It fills in your name automatically. You just click on OK, and they're gone from the list. Now you notice before it had up at the top of the screen, you had to choose a choice of waiting or show all, and now it's down at the bottom here. So if I click on show all, it shows me everybody. You can see the time service shows up on the screen now just like before, and it's in order here. If I want to see just my students, it'll filter out just the ones that have my name next to the advisor. So you can see it works pretty much the way it did before. It's not like we did a whole new way of working. The only difference is it's a web application versus a client server. Okay. And again, if I click on the print button up here, I should get the drop report just like we did before. So you notice on the print, it's going to print whatever is applicable in the current mode you're in. You can see when I'm on the drop-in screen, I get the drop-in report. Okay, if I leave that and go back over to my grid when it finishes thinking here, it's trying to run a report. I clicked on the wrong button here anyway. So if I go back to my grid and I click on the report button, as I get the daily report or the snapshot report. So basically, the report choices that come up are based upon what your access rights are into the system. So I think one of the things we can talk about for just a minute is I want to go back to the appointment screen, the student appointment screen. And I bring it up just like before, double click just like we did before. You can toggle between the IDs. If I want to go to guest ID, I can do that, or I can go back to a student ID, pretty much like before. Again, because the F9 is not here anymore, I can't use the F9 to toggle, so it's just a matter of clicking on the name to toggle between the different IDs. I can generate a guest ID just by clicking on the little pencil here. It'll fill it and give me a chance to fill in the person's name. I'll skip that for right now. All the rest of the stuff works pretty much the same. You saw with the student's name, it allows me to break it down now. Before it was always one full name, last name, comma, first name. Now we're storing the information as last name, comma, first name, as well as the first name, the middle name, and the last name as separate fields for improved visibility on email confirmations and things like that. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen here, the confirmation options. We've got email, print, and text based upon what your school supports right now, very much like before, and whatever one happens to be checked when you book the appointment will basically generate an email or print an output or generate a text based on what's going on in the system. And let's see, what else do we have here? Now, I don't know if you've seen this or not before, but one of the relatively new features in SARS Grid that we brought across over here to SARS Anywhere was from additional information, which you're all familiar with, I'm assuming, from before. Basically each school has their own set of questions here. You can bring forward from the additional information screen to the appointment screen a number of yes/no additional information questions. And what it's designed to do is to give you a heads up about certain things that have been taken care of now. You can see in the case with John here, he has had his ed plan, he's had assessment, he's had orientation, all those things are done. But if I was to leave here and come in for somebody else like Robert, hasn't done any of that stuff yet. So it gives you a snapshot view without having to go to this button to check to see what of these things have been finished or not. Okay. The other addition we have made to this is when you reschedule an appointment, we call it moving, you can send a email or text confirmation, and if the appointment's canceled, you can send a email or text confirmation to the student to confirm that in fact that this appointment was canceled. Okay. Let's see, the last thing on my list today is scheduling actions. Okay. And you saw that, making or canceling appointments, that's the same difference. I mean, it looks just like SARS Grid. If I bring this up on the screen right now, it says cancel down here. If I click on cancel, it's going to ask me for, my initials. And based upon, what the option was for email or texting or whatever the confirmation of the cancellation, it takes place. Okay, and again, all this stuff basically is the same as it was in the old version. For process to stop. If I say I'm going to move this appointment, that part's just a little different, but you don't have the function keys anymore. So if I came in here, I click on this, I go over to Quick Links, and I click on basically move an appointment. Okay, you notice it instantaneously changes to move for me. Now I could go to another day, click on next, find a spot that's open, double click on it, put my initials in, and I'm going to turn this off so I don't send myself another email. Click on yes, and it moves that spot. Okay. If I was copying, when I get to that stage, say I was going to copy this appointment. Okay, so I click on it, I go to Quick Links, and I click on copy the appointment. Okay. Well, how do I stop it? Pretty much, before I go back to quick links again, and there should be here a, where is the, okay, there it is, stop copying appointment. Okay, and it stops. So you copy it numerous times and then basically stop when you're done. So everything is handling pretty much in the same kind of methodology as we did with SARS Grid, we're doing with SARS Anywhere. So I'm willing to wager, not too much, but I bet you find that most folks can pick up the slight differences very, very quickly and feel very comfortable and adept with using the new version. We're offering the ability for schools to play with a test site at our school, at our site, to get comfortable with it before you go live yourself. You have to have your administrator contact us for that. There's that's the ability for you to try it before you fly it, so to speak. And I think that's everything for today. So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to you reviewing this at your leisure, and there'll be some more webinars about SARS Anywhere coming out very shortly. Again, thank you very much